Hi there, my name's Simon Holt and I'm a video producer. I've been in the industry now for 20 plus years. I've worked in all types of areas of video production, so from corporate videos, training content, marketing videos, online video, done some TV, and also worked here in Australia and overseas. From my point of view and many others, video is the most powerful form of communication. I'm sure we've got such a wide variety of people in different roles and also different industries watching this presentation, and I'm sure if I could speak to each one of you individually, we could sort of do a deep dive, a bit of a strategy session to work out how video is going to essentially benefit your role and your business. And it's not just creating one video, it's creating a series of videos and different types of videos. You'll be amazed, hopefully after this presentation, you'll understand just the many different platforms and the ways you can get your message out using video content. So I'm really excited over the next hour or so to really share my experience and also insights into how you can effectively use video content to implement within your business. So I understand that many of you are from small businesses, perhaps you're just starting out on your entrepreneurial journey, or it's something that you're considering and doing soon. But I strongly recommend that video content is going to be a big part of your communications, your marketing, your training. So straight off the bat, I just want to give you a few ideas and examples of how video is going to really benefit your business. So first of all, video is really going to help you raise your brand and profile, and we'll be going into a lot of detail into this presentation. So when I talk about raising your brand and profile, it's not just about building your business brand, it's also about building your personal profile, because people like to work with people that they know, like and trust, and video is the best way to get your message across and also for people to get to know you. Also talk about how to reach a targeted or broad audience, and video is the perfect way to do that. So just imagine you release a video, pop it on YouTube, perhaps a little promo video, and instantly people from all over the world can see that video. Not just having that broad audience, that global audience, but how to really niche down and target specific audience to get the most traction from your video message. You can also monetize your video content, because effectively it is a 24/7 sales tool. So not only is it going to be a great sales tool for today or perhaps next week, it's going to be a great sales tool for years to come potentially. So it's a great way to showcase your services and your products. Video is also a great way to educate your team and your customers. So firstly, from your team point of view, you want to have that consistency behind the way that everyone works within your business. When it comes to the customer point of view, well, there's so many variations and options here you can look at as well. So online courses, perhaps having that extra source of income. You could also perhaps bring in some subtle marketing messages within, feature demonstrations of your products and dedicated web pages to just showcase how your products and services work. So that's a really big benefit for your customer. Video also helps you save time, and I'm sure everyone here watching gets asked very similar questions by different customers at different stages, and that's where a frequently asked questions section on your website is perfect. Video content will also help you build a community. So by building a community, you can really share your knowledge, share your experience, and essentially it'll help you build a global community if that's what you wish to do. Video is also a great way to retain and engage people, and a great example of this is your website. So if you've got video featured on every page of your website, you'll find the view time and the people will stay on your website much longer and also engage with your brand and your products much more. And of course, I mentioned it before, video will allow people to know, like, and trust you. So really looking forward to having you along for the next hour or so as we talk about how to create great videos. Not only that, we talk about how those videos are going to generate more revenue, they're going to attract more clients, they're going to help you build a community and also make a lasting impact. So what are my goals as far as this presentation to give you the most value when it comes to video content and video production? Well, firstly, it's aimed at two different audiences. Those people that want to create their own content, so whether that's filming, it's planning, it's also editing their own content. I'm going to give you some really valuable advice there. Then on the other side, there might be those projects. I'm sure there will be plenty of those projects where you've got a higher budget, you've got a greater purpose. It's a much more complex project. So this is when we bring in the professional production team. So I'm going to look at it from 2 points of view. So the other thing I want to do is break some of the myths when it comes to video production. There's 3 categories that really, after this presentation, I'm sure should alleviate some of those concerns. So first of all, it's budget. People think that video can be really expensive, or not getting it done right can be expensive, whereas yeah, I'm just going to give you quite a few options. As I said, DIY or hiring a professional crew, you're going to get value for money either way. Then we talk about time. Often people think I don't have the time to do the planning or the filming and other bits and pieces. So I'm going to talk about scheduling and just maximizing your time, and also the overwhelm. People getting in front of camera, it's a new thing to them. So we want to talk a bit about body language, about presentation skills. So, but there's so many other things. It's like even just in the back end, just trying to organize a film shoot. So yeah, we want to talk about overwhelm and just how you can alleviate that. And again, just having the right production partner is really going to help with that. And I guess I'm not going to directly answer some common questions we get. And often inquiries come through and people simply just state just how much does a 2-minute video cost. So what I'm going to do is break down why essentially a video is like building a house. I'm going to use quite a few metaphors during this presentation. It's not as simple as saying how much does a 2-minute video cost. It's a lot more that needs to go into the brief and details around what's required. The other question we often get asked is what is a production process. So people, again, we talk about overwhelm. They're just don't quite understand the just what's included or necessary, I guess, in pre-production, in production itself, the filming side of things, and also post-production. And then I guess the bookends is the strategy and also the distribution. And I guess the other question we always get asked is what equipment should I buy? And again, it's different for everybody. And I guess we could talk about the necessities, and if you need to set up an in-house studio like I've got here, or perhaps it's something a bit more basic where you just need some accessories for your smartphone, or perhaps you need to go high-end and get the drones and get the gimbals and also the 8K and 4K cameras, that sort of thing. So everyone's different, and hopefully those 3 questions I can sort of answer, not directly, but you'll get a better idea of the answers after this presentation. So what will I be covering over the next 60 minutes or so regarding video content? Well, first off, I'm going to talk about why video, why you need it for your business. Perhaps it's building your own personal brand. You've got so many different uses with video, and I just want to touch on a few of those, even give an example of a typical day and just how many platforms you're exposed to as far as video content. Then we're going to talk about the 8 steps to creating your own effective video content. And I'm going to go into a bit of detail around each of these. So the first one is the most important one, and that's the strategy. We've never had a client come to us, here's 10 grand, can you make us a video, without actually having a plan as to what that video should be or what purpose it serves. So I'm going to go into detail about this strategy and just how important that is. Then we're going to go into the creative development. So you've worked through your strategy and now it's developing those ideas and putting the creative treatment on it. So the scripting, the storyboarding, and all the other assets and elements you need to create a really good video. Then we go into the planning. So once we've got our scripts and our creative signed off, then it goes into the planning, whether it's basic videos, similar to what I'm doing today, is simple presentation, or you may be creating a series of videos for your business. So yeah, there's so many different aspects of planning that you need to consider as well. And then we're going to go into filming. So I'll start off by giving you some tips if you want to record your own content, whether it's just with your smartphone. So I'll just give you some tips on audio and lighting and those types of things. And then also we'll talk about working with a professional crew and what their expectations are and how you're going to get the best results with filming and finding locations and talent and things like that. Then we're going to go into post-production. I know many of you out there are pretty keen to learn video editing, and I'll touch briefly on different editing programs, whether it's free or monthly subscription and those sort of things. But yeah, editing is so much more than just cutting together a few clips. So yeah, depending on how dynamic you want to create your videos, you can add animated content, music, sound design, that sort of thing. So we'll go into detail about that. Then I just thought I'd have a small section on transcriptions and captions, because it's so critical having these on our videos these days. So something like this, I'm giving a 60-minute presentation, I'll transcribe that and turn it into blogs and things like that. But then on the other hand, if I want to create short clips from this presentation, then yeah, I'd like to get that captioned, and people often will watch a video without any sound, so captions are really important. So we'll talk a bit about that. Then we want to talk about distribution. So whether it's social media, whether it's your intranet, perhaps it's your LMS platform, even television, we're going to go into different formats of distribution. I know there's other presenters talking about Facebook and advertising and things like that, but yeah, just want to touch on that and just making sure, yeah, you set everything up right. Again, back to strategy and planning, that you've got everything ready to go and it's all organized well for your distribution. And then finally, the final step is repurposing your content. So I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm going to use, again, this presentation to prove just why video is the most important form and effective form of communication. And yeah, we're going to break down, just archiving, saving overlay footage that you can use for other videos down the track. And then to finish off, we've got some giveaways. So firstly, we've got this guide and a few other little bits and pieces, and also some packages that we can put together for you. So editing and yeah, creating a profile video. But I'll go into much more detail around that, because these packages you won't want to miss, and yeah, fantastic rate for those. So stick around to the end. So I just want to talk a bit about my journey over the past 20 years in video production, and just how much change I've seen in that time when it comes to video content, not only the technology, but also the way that we're distributing the messaging, the video messaging, and how people are viewing and their behaviours and things like that. I was lucky enough straight out of school to yeah, jump into a creative course which introduced me to a number of different creative industries. But video production, that was the topic that really stood out for me. And I guess when assessing all those different creative industries, for me, I could just see the potential of video production. This is back in the mid-90s, and it was such an important form of communication back then. It was essentially, you could already see it was just going to become more and more relevant for people, for businesses moving forwards. And then moved on to another job where I spent the next 10 years. When I started that company, focused on off-the-shelf training videos. And again, we talk about how can we monetize our video content, and this was a fantastic way of doing that. It was a fantastic system, and they had maybe 60 or 70 titles, and basically they just sold these to businesses around Australia and even overseas, and it was a fantastic way that I got introduced to just how a video product can be essentially sold and monetized well. But of course, that wasn't the only service they provided. We actually did a lot of custom work. So we worked with major retailers doing their TV commercials, and also did lifestyle TV, countless corporate videos, and of course, custom training videos as well. Lots of sales and marketing. So within those 10 years, I just got introduced to such a wide variety of ways that video content could be produced and consumed, and all had their own separate purpose. And then it was, again, after that 10 years, I got I call it once in a career opportunity to live and work in London. So decided to pack up and head over to London. And again, this was a really interesting way of looking at video production, and just how a different market and I guess a different country, how much you had to adapt your, not necessarily the technology, but it was more about the messaging. So the messaging that worked in Australia didn't necessarily connect with the audience over in the UK. But so that was really good to work with a number of different production companies over there. And then in 2010, decided to come back to Australia and start up Visual Culture, and have been having a very successful time working with many different clients over the last 10, 11 years across, again, multiple roles, multiple industries, and again, the video content that we produce is just so important and so diverse as well. Everything's got a different purpose, and what it comes down to for each video to be successful is setting up the right strategy and the planning as well, and just understanding a bit about the audience as well, and just how are you going to get that video seen, because as we all know, there's just so much video content out there, so you need to stand out from the crowd. So this leads me on to a fun little segment I thought I'd put together, and that's essentially getting you to think about just how many touch points and how many times you see video content throughout your typical days. So I'm sure I've listed off at least 20 different ways that video has been exposed to you throughout the day, and I'm sure if you tallied up your own typical day, you'd probably tally up a lot more than that. But essentially, all of these videos have a specific purpose, and that is to grab your attention, it's to make you take action, and it's also to keep you engaged. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not big on promoting video stats and things like that. I've put a few on screen for you to look at as far as when it comes to online video marketing. But for me, it's the stats that we hear from our clients that don't necessarily have a number to them. So one example is a training video package we put together. There was for a hotel chain. They've got cleaners and hospitality workers. And unfortunately, there was a lot of injuries happening behind the scenes and led to a lot of lost time work, and also came to a great expense for the business as well. So by putting together this video package and getting that out there and having the team learn from the demonstrations that were shown in the video, over the next 6 to 12 months, they actually saw, I think they estimated around a 60% reduction in the injury rate. Now, that's a key stat that you really want to hold on to. So that's just one example of just how powerful video can be to have those actions taken and just provide a solution to any issues you may be having in your business. Okay, so let's head into the 8 steps of creating effective video content. The first step, the most important, is developing your strategy. So my boss, he liked to compare creating video content. He said it's essentially like building a house. So you need to start with strong foundations, good planning, and also developing a really solid framework for your building, and then filling out the details with the walls, the roof, and of course all the decorations and decor and the furniture as well. So then you've got to decide what type of house it's going to be. Is it going to be a simple cottage, which is just a simple, easy to produce video, or perhaps it's a major development where you've got essentially a big series of videos. So the first thing with this strategy is that you need to define the purpose of the video that you're creating. So what solution is it going to provide your business? Perhaps from a marketing point of view, perhaps you want to build your personal brand. Perhaps from a safety point of view, you want to keep your team safe. So creating a series of safety demonstration videos is the way to go. Perhaps for internal comms, it's rather than just not getting any engagement through your e-newsletter and things like that, you just create short videos with your senior leadership team and things. So yeah, again, the purpose, the goal, the aim of what you hope this video will achieve, that's the number one thing you need to look at. So next up, you need to identify the audience that this video needs to appeal to. So I'm sure a lot of you have done work on developing a persona of a target audience for your business and your service. The same goes with video. So you need to identify who the person is that you most need to resonate with. So I guess you could look at going really deep and identifying their age, and I guess their gender, and also their interests. Perhaps it's the roles that they take on, and also the industries that they work in. So again, once you've got a clear idea of who that audience is, then it makes things much easier when you come to script and creative development, that the content that you're going to produce is really going to stick with them and engage with them. And then you want to measure your return on investment. So I'll use a quick example of a marketing video. Perhaps you've invested 10 grand in producing a fantastic looking marketing video which promotes your products and services. So what you want to do is identify just how much revenue you generated from that campaign. So let's say you've sold $100,000 worth of your product or services, then that 10 grand investment, well, that's a very good 10-to-1 investment. So yeah, you've got to measure that initially and just looking at planning and just which platforms you can get those videos out to get that best return on investment. Then you've got to look at what resources you'll need to bring in to bring your vision to life through the video content you produce, and whether that could be DIY content, filming yourself, editing yourself as I mentioned, or perhaps it's hiring a professional crew for those more complex and creative jobs. And one really important part of strategy is that yes, you can produce a fantastic looking video, but if you don't look at the how, the where and the when of where the video is going to be distributed, then all of that work and all of that expense could go to nothing. So you've got to find the right platforms to get your video seen. Do you actually need to film it in portrait mode, let's say for Instagram stories or perhaps TikTok? Perhaps you are looking for LinkedIn videos or YouTube videos, so that way you use landscape. Perhaps you're looking at square format, which many of the social media platforms use. So again, really important in your planning, you understand just where the video is going to be shown and you record in the correct dimension. And finally, there's many different ways you can measure the success of a video. So look at, I guess, revenue goals. Perhaps it's bringing on new clients. Perhaps it's, again, just developing a bigger following on social media, and of course, getting more views and likes and shares. So yeah, you've got to identify what does success look like for that video content once it's been released. So when it comes to working with a professional crew, often you'll have a strategy or briefing session to start with. It could even be just a simple form that you fill out on their website, but there's going to be a number of questions that you need to identify. And again, if you've done the right planning in the strategy that I mentioned earlier, then all of this information should come quite easily and be easy to collate as well. Developing a great creative brief, we've got templates for that we often ask our clients to fill out. So it includes things like giving a bit of a background and overview of the project that this video will be part of. We also ask for you, again, to detail the aim and the purpose of the video or the video campaign. What action do you want to see? What solution is it going to provide? That's really where you need to. The more information you can give in that aim and purpose, that sort of everything sort of trickles down from there. Do you have a budget range? I know many of you out there are new to video and producing content with a professional crew, so you might not have an idea exactly of what budget you need, but that's where you just need to have that discussion with your video production professional, that they'll give you some advice on developing the best quote within your budget. Again, you need to look at that return on investment, just how much should you invest in video, and just what are the solutions and different ways you can get that content produced. You should also outline your project timeline, so there are any specific deadlines you need to stick to, and also the key contacts. Who's going to be the person managing this project with that professional crew? Do you have a script or perhaps a creative treatment already developed? Perhaps you've got information on the background of a specific project that you can provide. Have you considered who is going to be the actual talent in the video? So that's something you need to think about, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail a bit later on. And finally, are there any samples you can share of content that you've seen that you really like the style of? Perhaps it's something you've already produced in the past, perhaps it's something you've seen on YouTube or television. The more you can share and provide inspiration to the creative team, the better your end result is going to be, and just refining that creative development. And that's a nice little link to step 2, the creative development. I guess there's a number of questions you need to ask when it comes to creative. Is this going to be perhaps a one video, a hero video that you put on your website as a front and center on your homepage? Or perhaps it's a series of videos that you're going to put on a YouTube channel. What style and tone will the video undertake? So there's no one size fits all. What's going to resonate most to really showcase your brand and also attract the audience that you need? Will the video be narrated, perhaps interview based, perhaps it's music only, or it could be no audio at all, just visuals? Is it going to be live action video or animated instead? Should you start your own channel to build a community and share your expertise? And also the importance of consistent branding. And this is something I just want to go into in a bit more detail, because I've seen a lot of businesses out there, they develop style guides specifically around more of the graphic design sort of area. So just how to treat your logo, the company colors that you should use, also the fonts, even going as far as the style and tone of language that you use in your printed materials, perhaps it's web materials, social media and things like that. But I'm amazed just how many businesses out there don't include guidelines on video. So video content is just so important. You just want to make sure you're consistent across all those different platforms. So perhaps you want to develop some assets, like perhaps it's an opening logo that's animated that you've got easy access to, and everyone in your team has got easy access to, and that should always be included at the start or the end of your videos. Perhaps it's the lower thirds, developing a quick motion graphics project that your creative can put together and quickly change names and roles and things like that, so it's always consistent across every video. And other things that come into sort of the branding guidelines for video could include things like color grading, or perhaps the style of music that you use. So all of these things are really important, just as important as it is for graphic design. So yeah, if you don't have video guidelines developed for your business, yeah, definitely speak to your designer about that, and also get some advice from your production partner to do that. And of course, one of the most important parts of your creative development, of course, your finished video, is getting your script and storyboard right. So do your research and collate all the information you need. The more information you can provide and source, the more defined your message is going to be. And we'll chat about just how your creative will help in honing down the right message for your particular video. So when it comes to scripting, is this something you want to write yourself? I know many of my clients like to write their own scripts, and we just provide a bit of script consultation. Other clients, they like to provide a bullet point list of the key messages they need to get across. Or you could go a step further and hire a professional copywriter to help write your script. So basically you'd have a really detailed briefing session where you'd have essentially an interview and just, again, identify those key messages and the themes you want to get across. So it's a few different ways you can go about getting your script developed. And the goal of any script is to give a really clear overview and visualization of what the final video concept is going to be, so there's no surprises at the end when the video is actually produced. And what we like to do with our scripts is break it down into two sections. So we have We See, which is the visuals. So not only descriptions about the scene and the action that's taking place in that particular scene, but also any text that needs to be included. And then we've got we here. So what is the dialogue? If there's no dialogue, what music we're going to use, or sound effects and things like that. So the more detailed you can be here, and the goal again is to give that really clear visualization to the person reading it so they can get a clear idea of what the finished video is going to be like. And then you need to consider whether a storyboard is actually required. So let's say, for example, an animated video, I would say yes, that would be a good idea to produce even if it's just a hand-drawn storyboard. But for something like interview-based content, then I wouldn't see a need for that storyboard. As long as you've got enough detail in that script and the ideas of the visual and a clear structure of how it's all going to come together, then sometimes the storyboard's just not necessary. And speaking of interview-based content, what we need to do here is develop a pretty clear structure about a list of topics that we want to include in this style of video. Unlike a typical script that's narrated, we need to identify who our interviewees are, what are the specific areas of expertise that they're going to speak to. And also a handy little tip is perhaps jot down in bullet point form some of the responses you hope to get. So that'll really help develop that question set as well. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is approvals. Now you go through a few different stages of approvals with script writing, but I just can't stress enough just how important it is to get sign off by everyone involved in the project, particularly key stakeholders. The last thing you want to be doing is going out and reorganising filming, or perhaps it's recording new voiceover. It's going to come at quite a big expense. So again, just make sure, I really want to stress just how important it is to get that sign off on the scripts before you start filming or move on to the next stage of production. Now, just before I finish off this section on creative development, I just actually thought it'd be a good idea to show you a typical structure of a very popular type of video, which is the case study video. Essentially, we break that down into 5 different sections. So first, you want the person to introduce themselves, tell you a bit about their role in their business. Then you want to uncover the problem that they were facing prior to working with you. And what was your approach to provide a solution to that problem? Next, you want to look at what was the successful outcome that your product or service provided, and why would they recommend you to others in the future. Basic breakdown of a typical case study video, but you can see if you stick to those 5 key areas, then you'll be able to develop a pretty clear question set around that based on the person, their role, their business, and also the problems they were facing. So step 3 in the process is getting organised and having a really clear plan put together. So what assets do you need to help produce the video? Is it talent? Is it perhaps locations, or perhaps it's something creative like animation? You know, who are you going to get on board to develop those assets? And then you need to look at, is it something you're going to do yourself? Perhaps it's with the filming and the editing, as I've mentioned, with that creative concept, or perhaps it is time to call in the professionals. And of course, when it comes to scheduling, is there a way that you can batch record your content? So let's say, for example, if you're creating regular LinkedIn videos like I do, what I prefer to do is, rather than just record one video at a time, I actually set aside an afternoon or a day and I'll try and record 5, 6 or perhaps 8 videos, short videos in the one session, and then edit all those together at a later stage. Perhaps internal comms, you could look at if you're booked in with the CEO to do an important internal comms message. Is there other people in the business that may also have important video messages that they want to record? So again, just develop your schedule, just maximize the time of a professional crew, and just get your content batch recorded. You need to consider the location that you're going to film. So perhaps it's simple in-studio filming sessions. So if you want to develop your own set, things like that. Otherwise, you can go and look at locations around your office and different points of view that you can have the camera and scenes, or perhaps it's a warehouse. And what we like to do when we go to warehouse or industrial areas is to actually do a recce. We call it a recce. It's basically to go out a few days prior, even before scripting takes place, and just get an idea of, I guess, the lay of the land and just what different areas there are within that warehouse. So warehouses are often noisy, so if you're going to be doing interview content, then it's probably good to find locations that are nice and quiet. Also identify what sort of times of day that different machinery might be operating. A key aspect to any video success is, of course, using the right talent. So that could be yourself. Perhaps you want to do a series of frequently asked questions that you place on your website. Answers a lot of your customer questions. Perhaps you want to use your own team or even your customers for a case study video. Perhaps your team is actually showcasing certain demonstrations of different ways of doing things with your product or service. So the great thing about either using yourself or your team or your customers, often there's no expense required, so that could be the best option for you. The next step up and the next level is using paid professional talent. So I'm talking about actors, voiceover artists, social media influencers or models and things like that. And there are a number of different pricing tiers, I guess you'd call them. And so from the internal content, which is probably more budget friendly, you move to the external content that you're producing. So we're talking about marketing campaigns, perhaps social media campaigns, or even way up to television advertising and things like that. Now, there are a lot of things to negotiate here and a lot of things to be aware of. So often with these external marketing campaigns, there are restrictions and usage rights. So perhaps you're limited to certain locations that the video can be shown. Perhaps it's only a short duration. If you've got let's say a 4-week campaign, you won't be able to use their image unless you renegotiate with them after that campaign's finished. When it comes to TV, especially in the negotiation stage, expect to add at least a few more zeros onto it. Yeah, there's a lot of things to be aware of. You might see that person, your favorite celebrity on screen. You would love to have them feature in your video, but just be prepared that, yeah, it might be a bit restrictive as far as budgets. So yeah, look at all the different options. And again, a professional team will help you find the right talent and help you cast. And then you need to identify the props that you may need for your video. So let's say, for example, if you're doing a series of recipe videos, do you have all the ingredients you need? Perhaps not just one version of each of the ingredients, perhaps you need 2 or 3 versions. And then you need to look at perhaps the scene design, the set design. Here I am in my studio, I've just used a few lights to brighten it up instead of plain white walls. So yeah, lots of things to consider when you're setting up your scene. And another one of those really critical elements as far as planning is to get your permissions organized. And I'm not talking about getting just the release form signed by your talent, even though that's really important to make sure they're signed off on the usage rights and where the image is going to be shown. But I'm also talking about things like locations. So I can remember back in London, we often, days before we went out to film, had to organise certain permissions to film in certain council areas. And then the final thing you want to do in your planning is to develop detailed call sheets and also scheduled documents. So again, we've developed our detailed schedules so we know who's going to be where and when and those sort of things, but a call sheet is essentially a quick guide. For us, it's normally 1 page or a few pages, and essentially it's got details of the date that you might be filming, the key talent, the key contacts, so phone numbers, so if somebody gets lost or running late, then you know who to contact. Also got addresses and things like that. Also just a bit of a detail about the schedule of the day. So sometimes if it's just a simple filming job, you may not need a call sheet, but again, for those projects where you've got multiple people involved, multiple crew, then always best to get a call sheet developed. Okay, on to step 4, and that's the filming. And yes, it is very exciting. We're almost ready to press that little red button to record, but we're not quite ready yet. There's a few things we need to consider. Number 1 is what equipment are we going to use? Again, if you're doing it yourself, is a smartphone the good option? Perhaps you want to invest a little bit more and just invest in a mirrorless camera, or perhaps a little professional camcorder. Or again, if you're hiring a professional crew, you need to identify what's going to be the best way to get your video recorded. We've found our locations, but yeah, once the crew arrives or yourself, you've got to find the best angles to film. And one term I like to use is work the room, and I'm not talking about that salesman that arrives at a party and can instantly talk to everyone and just has everyone engaged in the whole room. No, I'm actually talking about how can you actually work a room as far as different angles. Again, your crew is going to look at different locations creatively, and you should do that yourself. Here I am in my office. I know there's a number of locations that I've filmed, as you can see here, through my LinkedIn videos. They're all from different points of view. And I know many of you watching have probably got the same question. I've already got a fantastic video recording device here, but what is the best practice and how can I get the best results from using a smartphone? So why don't we take some time out? I'll just show you a quick segment on best practices to get the best results, but also look at ways that you can record great video without too many accessories or having to go in and change any of the manual settings. So let's go. So first of all, just wanted to chat about finding an ideal location. So you want somewhere that's ideally nice and quiet, not too echoey. Here I am in my office. I've just found a nice little angle there. I've got a nice coloured light in the background. But you might find that you've got a nice vase of flowers or paintings or even a bookcase and things that you can put in the background. Next thing I want to talk about is actual audio. I've actually used the headphones that come with the smartphone, which actually has a little microphone. I've sort of tucked that under my shirt there so you can hear it's nice and clear audio, and I'm sitting maybe half a metre away from the actual smartphone itself, but I do want to show you what it will sound like if you actually use the smartphone internal mic. Right, so now what you can hear is the internal mic from the smartphone, and I've actually got a busy highway next to me, and you can probably hear a lot of echo, a lot of background noise, probably birds chirping and things like that. So when it comes to lighting, you want to use the available light that you have. I'm lucky I've got a nice big window over here, which is streaming some really nice natural light. It's not direct sunlight. You don't want to have direct sunlight on your face. I've turned off the fluorescent lights here in the office. They were a bit too much. Down lights as well is not going to be a good look. So yeah, try and avoid those. You might find if it's a bit later in the day that you could get a lamp and use that. And what you're looking for is nice, even lighting on your face. One thing I suggest you avoid, even though it might be tempting, you might have an amazing background looking outside your window, is to actually film yourself in front of that window. Now what the camera is going to do, it's going to overcompensate as far as exposure to the brightest part of the image, which just happens to be the background. So you can see here on my face, yeah, the shadows and things just aren't great. The next thing I want to talk about is framing. I don't have a smartphone holder, so what I'm actually doing is using a box and having my laptop on top of it, opening up the laptop and then, yeah, trying to position the smartphone so it's as straight as possible. You ideally want to have it as close to eye level as possible. Now, what you don't want to be doing is, yeah, positioning the smartphone low, and same again, you don't want it too high looking down at you. Try and position yourself nice and centered, and you also want to avoid looking at yourself on screen. There's a little camera lens right here at the top of the screen on most smartphones if you're using the front-facing camera, and that'll ensure you're looking straight down the lens, and most importantly, you're engaging the audience. And that leads me on to the next point as far as delivering the presentation itself. So I know a lot of people tend to reach out, press record and start talking straight away. What you want to do is reach out, press record and just wait a few seconds. Get yourself into position, just check your framing's right, and by all means look at yourself on screen to check it's all okay. Then once you're ready to start presenting, give it a few seconds, nice big smile, take a breath and start presenting. The same goes for the end of your presentation. Just make sure you've finished talking, just take a few seconds, maybe a nice smile at the end there, and then reach out and press stop record. So there you have it. There's a few quick tips on getting the most out of your smartphone for video recording. And then once you've mastered recording on your smartphone, perhaps you want to upgrade, perhaps you want to invest a bigger budget into, say, a mirrorless camera where you've got more accessories and even higher quality and easier to manage, or perhaps you want to look at getting a professional camcorder. There's a few different options there. So when it comes to presenting, I just want to give a few pieces of advice. First of all, relax, you know your stuff. I know it's pretty daunting thinking about speaking directly to camera and who may be watching, but it is something you get used to over time. So I always suggest practice, 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 and the more you do it, the more consistent you can be, the easier it will come. Remember that you'll be your own worst critic. The viewer is there ready to resonate with the value you bring, so focus on that value. Try to keep it short, sharp and succinct, and to be honest, this is advice I've been given and I really should take that on more often. Maintain eye contact with the lens as we've discussed. The other consideration is, do you know your content well enough that you can ad-lib, or would you prefer to script it out and use an auto cue system? Now I'm sort of doing a hybrid of both today, so I've got my bullet points showcased from a laptop onto the auto cue system, but you may decide to script out the entire thing. Now, we've worked with so many different people and so many different presenters, and everyone's different. Some people can just come in and just one take, they've got it, and they just off the top of their head, whereas others may prefer to use that scripted content. So we've got an app for that. Yeah, there's many different ways that you can use an auto cue system. And for peace of mind, just remember you can do multiple takes, like I'm very grateful for this presentation. So when you are working with a professional crew, trust them. They are there to make you look and sound good. So take on their advice and work together to get the best outcome for your video content. And finally, practice, 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 and be consistent. Same with anything in life. The more often you do something, the better off you're going to be in the long run. So I'll quickly talk about interview techniques from both the interviewer point of view and also the interviewee. So the first thing you want to do between both of you is maintain eye contact. So if you're the interviewer, the last thing you want to be doing is looking down at your notes. You're the person that you're interviewing. They're immediately going to think, well, they're actually listening to me, they're paying attention, and you're not going to get the best response. The other important thing is to listen, particularly if you're the interviewer. Now, you may have your set questions, but you might find that certain responses are sort of going down a different path. So if you're listening intently, develop new questions on the spot and just follow that journey and just see where a certain question set takes you. So often in the finished video, you're actually not going to see or hear the interviewer and their questions. So it's really important as the interviewee that you try and include the question within your answer. And as you're not going to be seen or heard for the interviewer, it's important to stay quiet during the responses. No, yes, understand, those sort of things. The viewer is going to become very confused about who's talking in the background. So if you don't quite get the right response, perhaps look at ways you can ask the same question, but in a slightly different way to get that different response. And for both of you, remember that the editors will only use the best sound bites to build the story, unless of course you wanted to make a bloopers reel or anything like that. And to round out this section on filming, I just want to talk about overlay footage, or what we call in the industry B-roll footage. So in the planning stages, you would have developed a really clear shot list. So perhaps it's of a demonstration video, you need to outline the specific shots to show a complete sequence. Also need to ensure in your scheduling that you've allowed plenty of time to capture the relevant B-roll footage. And also, if you are conducting an interview, I always suggest that you do the interview first and then shoot the B-roll, because often within interviews there's some ideas or concepts that come up that you may not have included on your shot list. So it's always good to include those and film those afterwards. The other great thing about capturing overlay footage is that you could actually capture more than is actually required for this specific video project. So think ahead, what can you do to repurpose certain overlay footage or perhaps archive it for other projects in the future? And finally, a big question we often get asked by our clients is who owns the footage and can we get a copy of the raw footage? So for me, I've got no issues with my business in handing over the raw footage, and I know many others in the industry are a bit hesitant to hand over the footage, but the way I see it, I like to use the analogy of a cake. Let's say a cupcake, for example. Now the cupcake is your finished, beautiful video, and the raw footage is actually the ingredients. And I guess you look at other things like the music and the imagery as well. The two other aspects when developing that finished cake is also the recipe and also the equipment. So that's the two areas where we're not going to hand that over. So the recipe is the creative, and that's again, that's 20 years of experience that goes into developing that recipe. And the equipment, well, you wouldn't expect to go and buy a cake and also get the fry pans and the stove and the pots and pans and those sort of things either. So you've got no issues handing over raw footage, but that's something you need to speak to with your professional production partner, just what the best practice is there, because everybody's different. Okay, so on to step 5, which is post-production, and that's been my key area of expertise in the 20 years that I've been in video production. So I guess the first question you want to ask is, do you want to attempt editing your content yourself or perhaps hiring an editor? And there's many different options when hiring an editor. So if you are looking at taking on the editing role yourself, then of course you could do an online course and learn the basics, or perhaps look at countless YouTube tutorials. But you've got to ask yourself the question, is that the best use of your time? Should you be focusing on other things within your role and your business? I'm sure within a day or two, get a good understanding of the basics of editing and also the features of your editing software that you've chosen. But what happens when you come up with more complex and creative ideas that you need to edit? Also, do you know how to compile an effective story? Will you need to create a really dynamic video with motion graphics and things like that? And finally, do you have the knowledge to deliver the final output? So I'm talking about social media or perhaps even broadcast television. Do you have the tech know-how to be really specific in what the final output needs to be? So just like filming equipment, we often get asked what is the best editing software that people should use when they want to edit their own content. First thing I'd ask, and if they find sort of cheap and free software, then is that really going to serve the purpose that you need? Again, on the other side of the scale, if you do want to invest heavily and invest quite a bit of money into an editing program, then you've got to consider which features are you actually going to use, because it is a very, very steep learning curve. Yeah, there's so many different options as far as editing. You've just got to identify the purpose and perhaps speak to a professional about what's going to be right for you. So if you decide perhaps wisely that editing is not your thing and it's not the best use of your time or even your resources and money, then yeah, look out, and you've got plenty of options to hire an external editor. So there's some great websites where there's marketplaces where you can actually put your creative brief online, and you'll have different creators from all over the world bid on your project. Take your time to find the right person. So again, the purpose of your video, what you want to get out in the final result, you want to look through each of these creators, shortlist them, and then have a look at their portfolio Importantly, have a look at the reviews from other customers, other happy customers, and just choose if they're right for you. And of course, with these websites and creatives, there is the old adage of you get what you pay for. And there's a few things to consider as well if you are going to work with an overseas editor. Could be a few barriers. So number one is they'll be in a different time zone. So you can imagine that they might be editing your content overnight. You might see things in the morning that might just drag out your project deadlines and timelines. You're also got to think about being able to contact them and speak to them directly. I know Zoom and video conferencing is so easy these days, but do your timelines and calendars match up so you can have regular updates with creative? Also, if you have film with a professional crew locally, and let's say it's all in 4K and you've got gigabytes of content, let's say 100 gigabytes of content, you've got to consider how are you going to get that content across to the editor. So I know here most cameramen as well, they would convert to a lower res file, but that does take time, and you just got to consider upload speeds and upload times and things, and also just the creative that you do hire, do they have adequate internet speeds and things like that. So big consideration is when you're getting your content across to them, just find the most efficient way of doing that. And one key question I like to ask, I know it seems like a good idea that you can go on and post a brief and find a great creative, and you might seem like it's a good fit, but are you the best person to be managing the creative? Understanding just how to deliver a proper brief and get the visual out of your head and make sure that that visual is being articulated well to the creative and you're getting exactly what you want, the result that you want. And another really important factor is to make sure your creative signs an NDA agreement, particularly if your product or service and video content is really highly sensitive in nature. Now, you don't want to, let's say you've got a new product developed and it's not being released for a few months, you want to make sure that they don't run off with your idea and undercut you, and you've lost your whole business that way. So just make sure you get that NDA agreed. So if you feel hiring an overseas editor isn't quite right for you, then I just want to talk about some of the advantages of hiring a local video producer. One thing to consider is, can they actually provide more creative direction? I mentioned before, are you the best person to be managing that creative side of things when you're working with a freelancer overseas? Whereas a professional production team, well, they're going to have a lot more creative direction and be able to assist you a lot more in that area. The other advantage is developing a local relationship. So perhaps you want to come in and see certain edits on their edit system, or vice versa. You want them to come to the office and you'll be able to give them detailed feedback or briefing on the edits. Production team that you work with, not only can they help you with the planning stages and also the filming, but it's also good to know that you've got the same team working on the post-production, so it's all a seamless process the whole way through. And of course, being local, same time zone, same city, so again, you probably get a quicker turnaround on your edits, not only edits for approval, but also for you to provide feedback and get it action pretty quickly. And you're more likely to have better resources and more creativity available with a local team. The final point about working with a local team is that they're going to manage the project management and also the archiving for you. If you're managing and working with an overseas editor, then I'd imagine that task will be left up to you. And again, is that your area of expertise, and how easily can things get lost, and how well do you know project management, particularly when it comes to video contents? So step 6 is actually a quick step, but a really important and critical step, and it's becoming more and more relevant with most of the video content we produce, and that's transcriptions and captions. Now, I could actually split this between planning and also post-production, but I thought I'll start off with transcriptions because I know a lot of the content I produce, particularly for LinkedIn or even creative ideas, creative briefs, I'll grab my phone out, I'll do a little voice memo, just speak to the brief for, maybe it's a topic that I want to discuss, and maybe for 5 minutes just do a bit of a brain dump and then have that transcribed, and then I'll go back and with the text I can sort of mold that into a script. And then when it comes to post-production and specifically for captions, what we like to do is provide a clean version, so no captions, and the other one with captions. So with the clean version, the great thing is that we can get the finished video transcribed, and we get supplied from Rev a file called an SRT file. So when you upload that clean video, let's say to YouTube or perhaps Facebook, you're often given the option to upload the SRT file. So that's got all the text, it's got all the timings that will match your video. So you simply upload those, and then the viewer's got the option to switch those captions on and off. Whereas the burnt in effect is perhaps burnt in captions is probably a better option for something like LinkedIn. I know a lot of people would prefer to watch videos, particularly if they're on a commute, for example, that they would want to watch without the sound, so captions come in really handy there. And then of course you've got the options for multiple languages, so there's quite a few websites out there and services that offer this. And finally, the other great thing about transcription text files is that you can turn those into things like blog posts. So yeah, there's so many different uses for captions and transcriptions. Okay, on to step 7, which is distribution and how are you going to get maximum reach for your video content. I'll just start by just going through a few different ways you can distribute your video. The options for getting your video content out there are just expanding week by week, month by month. So we'll start with an area that's been quite popular in the last 12 months is live streaming, but also the pre-recorded event. But live streaming has been a very popular option, particularly with the production industry. One thing that worries me a bit about live streaming, particularly if you've got a big project, is technology. Even though you can do all the testing you like, but if something happens like kicking a cable out on the internet, then all the viewers that are tuned in, they're going to miss out. The other thing about pre-recorded content, people think that it's not quite authentic, but I beg to differ. I think the way you present it, and you think of late night TV shows are actually filmed in the afternoon, but you still get the same engagement. Often, if you're watching a sports match that you recorded the night before, you're still going to get engaged and cheering for your team and that sort of thing. So, I don't believe that pre-recorded content, if it's done well, it's still going to be authentic. And you can also add in live elements into that pre-recorded content. So let's say you have an hour-long presentation. There are live elements where you can do a live Q&A, perhaps over Zoom, but just focus your creativity and getting that messaging right within the pre-recorded content. Of course, social media is very much becoming a video-first platform. The attention span on social media, you just got to make sure you get that right, because you literally have 1 or 2 seconds as people are scrolling by. So there's a lot of considerations there. If you're creating video for social media, how is it going to stand out from all the noise, all the crowd and all the brands, and making sure you target the right audience and you're getting the right response and the right action taken from your video content there. Advertising like pre-rolls on YouTube, for example, they're really important to get right. So often you only get 5 seconds before you see a little button to skip ads. So what you want to do is try and grab that viewer's attention within that 5 seconds. So that's one of the critical things about video production, is that you need to grab people's attention straight away, because attention spans are becoming less and less. So just make sure you get that hook straight away. So one way to retain that viewer's attention and have them keep watching is to really set out your key message and what the final outcome of the video is going to be. If they watch the video through, then this is what they're going to see, this is what they're going to learn, this is how they're going to be entertained. So that's a good way of just grabbing their attention to start off with. Another good tactic is to actually develop a list, a numbered list. So for this presentation, of course, it's 8 steps to creating effective video content. So people are going to be wanting to know what the next step is or what the next number is. It's also a discussion point as well. So you often find, especially with social media, you might build a bit of community and people give their opinions on whether they agree with you or not. So that's a good way of maintaining that viewer's attention. And while we've been speaking about advertising, broadcast television, of course, we all know that for the last 60, 70 years has been the way to go to get your brand seen by a wide audience. Bear in mind, there are a lot more costs associated, not only in production, but if you want certain time slots on certain days on certain channels, then expect to pay quite a bit more for those time slots. So we've got the advertising, social media, marketing videos, they're all external facing. What about your internal videos? So let's start off with your intranet. It's perfect for your internal comms videos, for example. So make sure you've got a good file system set up. There's no firewalls in place, so just make sure you check the tech specs and make sure your video producer understands that. The other thing is your training, your safety content. So for example, an induction video you might want to place on an LMS platform, and learning and development platform. So this is great because there's so many interactive options for these platforms. So essentially, create some interactivity where you have a viewer watch the first 3 minutes, and then they're posed with a multiple choice question, the only way they can move forward in the program is to answer the question correctly. If they answer it wrong, then you can always go back. You can also do things like hotspots and put your text and things within these interactive LMS platforms. So yeah, that could be the best option for you, and there's plenty of options out there. So your website should be chock full of video content. So I'm talking every single page and multiple videos on a page really. So number one, you'd have your hero or company overview video, or perhaps a bit about you as the company founder on your homepage that people can get to know you. So I know personally when I'm doing some research on a company, I always look at their website and just see if they do have that overview video to give me an idea of who I'm about to work with. But also if you've got different services and products, you could perhaps create some short videos for those, and we find people would prefer to watch a short video first, and then they'll go into the bit more detail around the text and the imagery on the web page as well. So the other thing I mentioned earlier was about frequently asked questions and perhaps office tours and customer testimonials. So yeah, video content, your website again should just be full of video content. So email marketing is another popular way to distribute your video. So it might just be as simple as a thumbnail that people click on and they're taken to either your website or other platform. Video brochures have been quite popular over the last few years, and there's just so many ways you can use this. Video brochures are a really good gift idea, but also a really good memento for the future, and all they need is just a simple USB to charge and and watch the video and load your content. Again, just consider where most people are going to be watching the video and just make sure you format it and design and develop the content to match and suit that particular platform. And finally, I'm not sure if these are still around anymore. I'm not sure if they made any sales there, but yeah, that's just another way of showcasing video content. And just quickly, you need to look at ways to drive views to your video content. So particularly if it's a marketing campaign, for example, you need to develop a strategy. Firstly is how you're going to get the most reach from an organic audience, and what that means is unpaid, people in your network, and what you want them to do is share it to their network and I guess build a community. And another great way to get your videos seen by the right audience and the right platforms, the right demographic, the right locations around the world is of course with paid advertising. And it's just amazing the back end of places like Facebook and YouTube, and just how specific you can target. And if you're resonating with a particular audience, then you can duplicate that audience and have that video shown to them. And it's all about testing. So yeah, if you create a few different versions of the same video with different text, for example, a description, then they're going to resonate differently. So you can test and track what's going to work best. But again, we go back to return on investment. If you invest $1 in advertising, you would expect hopefully to get $4 or $5 back. So yeah, it's all about just finding the right platform, the right audience, and of course what's going to most resonate with your product and service to that audience. And the other way to drive views is potentially developing sponsorships or affiliates. If you're connected to a well-known brand, then they're going to drive viewers your way. I remember a music video that we produced a few years back was picked up. We produced it here in Melbourne. That was picked up by one of the German record labels, and had a really good run, quite a number of views all across the world. And so if you're connected with the right brand and right sponsor and affiliate, then you can expect to see greater views. And then after your campaign or your video has been released, you want to be able to track and measure the performance of that video. Again, we're going back to ROI. There's some great tools out there that you can help with this tracking and measuring. So I know Vimeo, Wistia, YouTube, Vidyard, all these types of video platforms, they give you really clear indications, not only on the number of views that you have, but also the watch times, or perhaps if people are watching the whole way through, they'll give you percentages on that. They'll tell you, again, the geography of where people are watching from. You could even go as far as identifying the age and the gender of the people watching. And that all helps you identify just who your audience is and sort of who your content is resonating with. So you can go back and refine your planning and strategy for the next round of video content that you're producing to really make sure you're targeting that specific audience. So I know with internal comms and the intranet, you can often, again, track just how many people are watching. So if you're sent out a large internal comms message from the CEO, you want to make sure everyone in the business has watched it. Try and consider what you need to do differently next time if it hasn't quite connected. So yeah, that's just amazing, the video analytics that you can get. You can even go as far as, especially with interactive video, and again, it's just interactivity and what's possible with video content is just growing by the month, by the year. So just see how you can track and measure those purchases and those links back to your products and services. Perhaps it's not about purchases, perhaps you want people to take a special quiz or a survey about your business or service. So yeah, again, that's easily embedded into video. I mentioned the LMS before, so yeah, make it interactive and get people to answer questions as you need to. And finally, your thumbnails, really important, particularly YouTube and Vimeo, and that's a way you can track and measure. Are they thumbnails just not hitting the mark? Are you getting feedback from people that, or they're skipping over, they're not quite knowing what your video is all about? So just make sure you get that thumbnail right and get the imagery right, and even just put a bit of text on that thumbnail. Just again, find a designer. We talked about external marketplaces, so things like Canva, you can design some fantastic thumbnails there. So yeah, just make sure you grab that attention. It's all about that hook, remember. You've got to grab that attention straight away. Okay, on to the final step, which is repurposing and archiving. As I mentioned before, you might have filmed a lot of overlay footage, so it's really important that you can know that you can repurpose that content. I know we've done that plenty of times for different clients where we've had different projects. So maybe it's an interview where we've perhaps found little snippets of interviews that might fit within a new story video that we're creating even 2 or 3 years down the track. Perhaps it's some overlay footage that shows a certain process. It could even be a history video, that sort of thing. So who knows, you could be using this content 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. So again, speak to your video producer, or if it's yourself that's archiving the footage, make sure it's easy to find. For us, we have a project number for every single job that we do. We can easily go back and identify which drive certain footage is on and go back and find those specific clips. It can go as far as, if you're creating a lot of content, particularly with overlay content, you want to find a way. Can you get somebody on board to catalogue the content? So specific scenes, if it's a particular car, perhaps it's a particular colour car, and they're driving on this certain freeway, then you can just put tags in there. So there's some great programs out there that can do that for you. Another good example of repurposing content, I like to call it the hero video. So let's say, for example, you're running a recruitment campaign where you might have one key 2 to 3 minute video which gives an overview into the company, a bit about the values, introduces the people in different roles, different departments. What I like to do, and we often find that we interview 5, 6, 7, 8 people. Everyone that we interview is probably from a different department. They're at different levels or different stages of their career. So you might have a junior right up to the CEO, but then you want to break it down into specific individual stories. So that's going to engage with a certain type of audience. And I guess that hero video, if that's what you want to focus on, you'd actually consider it as probably not just one audience you need to focus on. I like to say that that one company video could potentially have 3 audiences. So again, recruitment, you could be looking at potential customers, and you could be looking at your internal team as well. So for your recruitment campaign, you want people to think, wow, I need to work for this business. And then you've got your customers that think, wow, we need to work with this business. And then of course your internal team, they think, wow, I work for this company. So you can see, same video, it's got 3 different audiences, 3 different purposes, but you're utilizing, and it comes down to good messaging, good structure, and good distribution, getting it in front of the right people. And when it comes to repurposing, I like to sing from the rooftops that video is top of the content tree. And there's just so many ways you can repurpose the finished video or even the raw video content you produce. So we talked before about transcriptions. If you get it transcribed, whether it's a raw interview or the finished video, you've got the text there. You've got a blog post that you can put out there. You grab short text snippets from there. Now you've got some fantastic quotes that you can use in social media. Add some imagery or grab some still frames from the video content. And again, you've got some really dynamic social media content or imagery that you can place on your website. You think about the audio. If you've conducted an interview, and potentially now you've got a podcast. I mean, you could just sit there and just come up with so many different ways you can repurpose that content. The great thing is that once you produce that content and you place it online, it's there for everybody to see instantly. Anywhere around the world, anyone can watch it. So I've said it so many times before that video is the most powerful form of communication. And when you start considering just how you can repurpose your video content, you're going to look at just so many different assets you can produce, and also all the different media platforms you can utilize. So again, video is the top of the content tree. So there you have it. That is the 8 steps to creating effective video content. I know you have a million questions and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer those. I'll share my details with you in a second. Again, just want to emphasize just how important video is for your business, and every business, every role, every person can use video, and it will provide a solution to not just one issue that you may have in your business, but many issues, whether it's marketing, communication, safety, training, development. Yeah, just look at the different avenues and different areas you can use video within your business, and you won't regret taking it on and embracing it within your business. It's about being seen, it's about being heard, it's about being remembered, leaving your legacy, changing people's lives. And we talk about the importance of people getting to know, like and trust you. And apart from meeting in person and speaking to people one-on-one, your video content can resonate and appeal to people all over the world. And my final point is simply be consistent. Just develop regular, consistent content. Video will change your life, both personally and professionally. Not only for you, but also your family and friends. It could be your team members, your customers, your key stakeholders, the community that you've built, and the followers that are hanging on every word that you deliver in your video content, because we all live in a visual culture.